You're listening to Catholic Family Podcast, Episode 7.
Thanks for listening. I'm Kevin Davis, and I'm very happy to be joined today by Father Eugen Rissling from Germany. Here, he's actually the parish priest in Ulm, Germany. And we're going to talk a little bit about Father's story, Father's path to the priesthood, his seminary life, his priesthood life, and also his young adult life, or his life as a child in Kazakhstan, and his experiences with communism, and maybe a little bit about his fears in what we might be seeing these days as well. Father Eugen, thank you so much for joining me.
Good evening, Kevin. It's nice to meet you and to meet you on Skype, yeah.
Exactly. You as well, Father. You as well. And so I guess to start, Father, can you tell me really briefly how long you've been a priest and where you are stationed as a parish priest?
Yes, I got ordained priest in October 1989 in Munich by Bishop Günther Stork, who was Doctor of Theology and in former times also assistant of a dogmatic professor in Munich University on the Catholic faculty. And since that time, I'm stationed in Munich and then in Ulm now. And I have made pastoral care on different places in southern Germany, mainly, but also traveling then to some other places outside of Germany in turns with Father Johannes Heine.
Right, and so you go stationed in Ulm, you travel to Czech Republic and to England when Corona isn't happening. Is that right?
Exactly. And then also to a place for many years to Switzerland, and then some other places, private visits in private houses in Germany.
I see. And so you've been a priest now for 32 years, Father. Is that right? So I
31 and few months and 2 months. Yeah,
okay.
3 months.
Right. And so you were a priest when I was 6 months old. So I was a little baby when you became a priest. so plenty of experience as a priest, Father. And I've known you now since I moved to Germany. I actually met you for the first time in Omaha, I believe in 2006. Is that right, Father?
Exactly.
Heine? Yeah.
Ordination, yeah.
Awesome.
But I'm sorry, I don't remember having met you then.
I was one of the many high school boys. It's no problem. Perfect. Well, Father, I would love to just get started where it all began. I would love for you to tell me a little bit about your childhood and your experiences as a Catholic, especially in Kazakhstan, and how you remember that time.
Yes, let me give first a small explanation about how our family have come there too. It was in the second half of the 18th century when our ancestors moved from southwest Germany to the former Russian Empire. You know the famous Catherine II. She was German. And she invited settlers, and they got some privileges, and many farmers moved there too. There were two main places where they settled. One part settled on the Volga River, the famous Russian river, and the other part, and so my ancestors, on the Black Sea coast. And then they have established villages, and they were completely German villages. And they have been, one village has been 100% Catholic one. The other village in the neighborhood was 100% Lutheran one. And then Baptists, Mennonites, and all the denominations. And they have grown up with German culture. They were all ethnically Germans. And Catholics, also the priests have come with the people at the first time, and then later they had a priest seminary in Saratov on the Volga River where the own priest could study the young boys, and they got ordained, and then they took the pastoral care of the faithful there.
And so you were always a Catholic.
Yes,
village.
Our family was always Catholic, and then they worked and lived, and then during World War II, many things have changed. And first, the German authorities, they came with the Wehrmacht, you understand. They said no when the front went west. They said, you follow us because we can imagine what will happen with you when the Red Army comes. Because you are Germans and you will have to pay the bill. Although you are completely innocent for the war and the consequences. And so my mother was, as a little girl, 4 or 5 years, in the county of Berlin. She had once a document, but the Red Army was faster, have passed the people and said, no, you do belong to our country, and sent them back, not to the old place in southern Ukraine, what was in that time then a part of Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, but also, or mainly to the Asian part. So my ancestors came to Kazakhstan, my mother to the Ural Mountains, and then the Germans had 10 years. They were not permitted to move from one county to another one within the Soviet Union because Germany lost the bloody war, and these were Germans, and only with permission of military authorities they were permitted. But then when this, was lifted in 1955-54, they have heard that there was a big group, comparatively spoken, a big group of Germans and Catholics in the city of Karaganda. In that time it was the Kazakh Soviet Republic, and today this is an independent country, Kazakhstan. And Karaganda was famous and is famous for coal mines, and so it has attracted many people. And what was very interesting, the Catholics they heard in Karaganda, they have been from the 50s Catholic priests who were also sent there too in order to work in working camps. But then when they got released, they started to search people, and the Catholics, they found them and they started with the pastoral care secretly, of course, because this was officially atheistic country. And so there were many stations and changes, but finally I can only witness, and this is pretty interesting, I can imagine for people living outside of Europe, especially on other continents, how it did work. So I got baptized by Polish Catholic priest, of course, a Polish one who was originally from the Diocese of Krakow in Poland. And he has come to Kazakhstan, or he has worked there in prison camps or working camps, and he got released in 1954 in the end of the year. And then I heard the story, he didn't know anything about, are here Catholics, what have I flock here or whatever, and he went to the cemetery. And he observed the people, they came for funerals. And then, as I have heard, on the second or third day, he has saw there was a group, they have prayed and they have sung Catholic songs. And authorities have tolerated it, some practice of religion in cemeteries. And then Father Wladyslaw Bukowinski, you hear a classical Polish name, he approached the people and he told them, you seem to be Catholic, I'm a Catholic priest. And the people, they got first a big shock. Why? Because they didn't know, is he really a priest or a KGB agent? But a priest has always ways to identify himself. He has simply to say some prayers in Latin, and then people recognized him as priest. So he started then. And then later, when I was born in 1965, it's not a secret, I got baptized by him in our own apartment. He has come from apartment to apartment, from house to house. There was no chapel, no church, and he has never been dressed in clerical vestments, of course. This was strictly prohibited. And then I remember as a boy, young boy, he came, and then in the evening we have invited some of the relatives, and then he has said Mass, and first he has heard the confession of the people, then he said Mass in the living room, and it was pretty interesting. He was not dressed in classical liturgical vestments. It was simply not possible. He had only the, how you say, the Chorrock in German, the chasuble? No, not chasuble. The when the priests pray or serve the Mass, the surplice, the surplice and the stole, and that was all, because he had to be careful in order, and then he has spent then in late 50s again, I think 1 or 3 years in prison again, before I was born. And once I heard a funny story from my parents. They said he was called then later again by the authorities to come to them. They have some questions. And he came with the suitcase. He has prepared himself for the prison again. And they asked him, what for? He said, yeah, but you will send me again to prison. They said, no, we have just few questions. He was prepared and not really worried. But his experience, he spent altogether 3 times. He has been imprisoned and spent altogether about 13 years in prison and working camps.
Wow. And so was he arrested, Father, just for celebrating Mass, or why was he?
Because he was priest.
Okay. Wow.
First time he got imprisoned, he was imprisoned from 1940 to 1941, June 21st. On June 22nd, the attack of the Wehrmacht to Soviet Union has started. So occasionally, and then later again 10 years in the Soviet Union in Kazakhstan.
And so for the people too, was it always a fear that you could be found by the police and thrown in prison?
Yes, I think it was obvious. The authorities, they knew that he is practicing, but we were hiding all. We were silent. They have simply tolerated. So, for instance, it's very interesting how we have done it. When the age came to receive the first Holy Communion, I was 8 years young. It was in 1973. And then an elderly lady, she gave us catechism lessons. We came together. We were 12 children in that year. And then she gave us instructions, and we knew much from the houses because we were privileged. I had my parents, good Catholics, and then also the grandma. And but officially we got the catechism lessons by this lady. And then on July 31st, 1973, I do remember, we had the first Holy Communion. The Mass started 5 a.m. Sunday morning. So the idea was we finish before the people arise from the beds, wake up. So we made it secretly, And yes, and I remember how it has happened. I have some memories on that day. And the priest was, only later I understood how much I have to owe him.
That's amazing. As a child, you don't really appreciate what you go through because it's normal for you.
Yes.
Right?
For us, it was clear we grew up automatically in a triple opposition to the system. First one, we were Catholics from the beginning. Then the second one, the ethnical, and especially the Germans, they were the fascists and the Nazis. Sometimes when you got some problems with other people, they accused you. And then the third one was the political opposition to the system. And we did always want to return to Germany. So in the school, they didn't know that I was believing in God, and only in the 9th grade it has come out, because there was a duty to join the youth communist organization. And it has happened automatically. When you had a certain age, you had to join. But I tried to search excuses. First, I said I have no dignity for this high organization. Then for a few months, silence. Then they asked me again, why not? I said, I'm not prepared because, and so on and so on. And then in the 9th grade, it was clear, no excuses, because 2 teachers, they called me to them and they said, do you remember I asked you in the 7th grade whether you believe in God, and you told me maybe. What do you mean? Are you believing God or not? And then it was a situation where I could not escape a clear confession. There was no chance. And then I said, yes, I had big fear. My knees were, you imagine, I was a teenager. I didn't know what will be the reaction. But I met 2 very wise and good women, these teachers. They let me in peace because I have not made any political or religious propaganda in the school. And they said, okay, there was no danger for the system from me. So they allowed me to live as I live. But I know other cases where there was a big fight, and teachers, they have more or less started with pressure on the children in the school.
That's crazy. And you see a little bit of that in today's society too, right, Father, where you see that pressure starting to be put from the state onto the children, and not necessarily against God, but against morality, for sure. And that's a little bit of a scary issue.
Yeah. And what I have understood then later, after becoming a priest, I understood having a retrospective to that situation. I could see in families where they have prayed, where the families have practiced as much as possible under difficult circumstances their faith, where the children grew up. For me, it was clear from the beginning, we had to hear all the atheistic communist propaganda in the school. I have never publicly contradicted. Could be dangerous. But it entered from one side and left immediately from the other side, because we got the good Catholic training or education in our families. And this is important. And we can be faced in very next future with some of analogical situations. and the basics must be given in the family. And where in the families was not prayed and faith was not so important, they reduced the level of relationship with the church, with the faith. And imagine, you wouldn't believe possibly, but we had until 1977 only 3-4 times per year confession and Holy Mass. My grandma visited some other masses in other people's houses, friends of her, but we could invite the priest only about 3-4 times per year. And this was a big event for us. We had a two-floor apartment and only 31 square meters, a very small one, and 5 people living. And then the priest came, and we have invited some other relatives. And then the priest spent the night in our house. So next morning he disappeared before we have woken up. And thanks to my parents and thanks to my grandma, we saved the faith and the Catholic identity. And for us, it was clear, don't believe the propaganda in the school, in the news. They do lie. This was the code, I would say, the code we grew up with. And
it should make us not take for granted and remember how important it is when we do have the sacraments and do have priests and do have chapels, that we take advantage of that and go as often as we can, because as you say, we don't know when that will be taken away from us. And if it is, then we have to have, I guess that or we don't have to, but we should have that stored up grace to help get us through the harder times when we will have to be the primary leaders and teachers of the faith for our families. And I think that's a very good point. And so, Father, during this time, what was the point where you started to think, I'm not just going to be a Catholic, I may have interest in becoming a priest? How did that happen?
A pretty funny and sounding strange story. We had never doubts on the faith, on the existence of God. This was clear for us. And then what has happened, in 1977, there was another priest who came freely to Kazakhstan as missioner. He was Jesuit father from Lithuania. And he has by any way cooperated with the authorities. And so we got permission to start with our own chapel. And then we built with own hands, the parishioners, a big church. From inside, it was a church. From outside, it was a huge house, a big house, without a crucifix, of course. It was in the 70s. And this priest, he has helped me also much for my priestly vocation. But unfortunately, he has introduced the Novus Order. And I was a diligent Mass server, altar boy. And so 6 years I have been a Mass server. So I learned to know the new Mass from inside and outside. But then we have then regularly the Mass, the new Mass, from 77 to 83, when we moved to Germany finally. And it was a summer afternoon in 1980 during the Olympic Games in Moscow. I do remember. I was 15. And this question has not really... I didn't think about this. I was 15, too young. And then a very strange story. My grandma, her Russian was very broken. She could practically not speak Russian. Although born in the Russian Empire, spending the entire life then late in the Soviet Union, but her Russian was horrible. Because we have been speaking the old Schwäbisch dialect, not the official German, but the old dialect was saved over the generations in Russia and Soviet Union. And my grandma, she had some prayer books written in the old German, by old German characters, Gothic, we say Gothic German. And she could not read the Latin characters in German, but only Gothic. And then for me, it was a challenge to learn these characters too, because they are a little bit different and you had to pay exactly attention. So I was alone at home on this evening and I took her prayer books and I tried to find out which character, which word is written there. So I was with 15 a clever boy. I found it out. But as a Catholic, I could not simply read. It was a prayer book. I have started also to pray. And then suddenly, I was feeling first time in my entire life emotionally the presence of God. And you can imagine a boy of 15 years, he's ashamed to have tears in eyes. And I got wet eyes because it was so emotionally so strong. But I was happy I was alone at home. Nobody has seen this. But this event has changed a little bit in some regards my life, because then I knew what about I am speaking, that God is really holy, that he is really good and our good Heavenly Father. And then I have started step by step to ask questions whether the priesthood would be something for me. But we didn't see a chance to become a priest in Soviet Union. I knew I have to complete my school to graduate. I knew I have to go to do the military service in the Soviet army, and possibly then later in the Novus Ordo seminary in Lithuania or in Latvia. But this was, we didn't know, I didn't know. And then I am a normal man, and we had also some girls there. I liked them too. It was a question, what is attracting you more? The life as a husband, as a father, or as a priest? And then step by step, and you know now I have decided and finally.
And so when was that? When did you decide? Was it after serving in the military?
No, I have not made the military service.
Okay.
This was a story because I had not a good health. I had, when I was 14, I got a chronic hepatitis. And the blood results were never good enough. And then they called me when I got 18. I went to the military area, and the medical check I didn't pass. So they gave me 6 months to wait. And then it was in April 1983. In March I became 18. Then they called me, and then in July we got from the 10th attempt, finally permission to come to Germany, and we left Soviet Union in August 1983.
And so how were you able to get that permission to come to Germany?
My parents, it was a fight of 9 years. 9 times the authorities said no. and the 10th attempt was positive.
Okay.
Because my parents were workers. My father worked 29 years as electrician in a coal mine, and my mother is a dressmaker. All my Kazakhs are from my mother. Some of my chasubles are from my mother.
Okay. But still, for the mother of a priest to have.
I show you. Yeah.
Okay.
And so then we came to Germany finally. The background is a very long story. I have spoken about this in the Fatima conference in October 2019, yeah. When I have been more than 1 year ago last time in Spokane during the Fatima conference. Yeah.
And so that story from coming to Germany or from being an 18-year-old and finding the sense. So how did you find the seminary in Munich?
What was the background? How, what has happened? This is a very long story. I explained it in that lecture.
All right, well, we'll make it a short story for this podcast. How did you go from an 18-year-old to a seminary in Munich?
Yeah, we came to Germany. And is this your question now? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. We came to Germany, and then I have found contact through my cousin to the former Father Günther Storck, the later Bishop Storck. It was in August, September 1983. My cousin stayed in touch with him, and then we came to Germany and we saw the new Mass. The modernism is much more progressed, more liberal. We had the new Mass, but the priest has not allowed the hand communion or women on the altar. And we came to Germany. It was a cultural shock for us. We saw decades later what has happened then. So, and then I started to reflect, possibly it's true that the new Mass is not the Catholic one. And so I came in touch with Bishop Storck, and then it was a quick process, I understood, and then I have completed my school education, and then I joined the seminary of Bishop Storck, who has started a small private seminary in Munich. And then in October 1989, I got ordained priest. And then until he died in April 1993, we continued with studies. Doesn't matter, seminarian or priest. As a young priest, you have to study always. And what is really good was a wise decision. You must never stop learning, generally in life.
And for Bishop Storck, was he consecrated as a bishop before the Vatican Council?
No, he first he has graduated, or he studied on the university, and he had in 5 topics diploma.
Wow! And
when he finished his university studies in 1962. He joined then with 24 the seminary in Münster, diocesan seminary in Münster. But during the Vatican II time, he was witness how the discipline has come down and many other changes. Then he decided to wait for a good Catholic bishop who has never practiced the modernism. So he found, and finally in 1973, the Bishop Sigobald Blasius Kurz, a German Franciscan bishop who was missionary bishop in China. And he got consecrated bishop on the end of October 1939 by Pope Pius XII.
Okay.
I do possess photographs from this episcopal consecration. There were 12 priests, consecrated bishops, and among them Bishop Kurz, and he belonged to the conservative group of fathers during Vatican II Council. And then Bishop Storck met him in 1973, so he has ordained him priest. And Bishop Kurz has never accepted the Novus Ordo Mass, but he died only about 3 months later.
Wow.
On December 13th, as Archbishop took later, then in 1973. And then Bishop Storck joined for a few years in the 70s, then later the Society of St. Pius X, but then he understood that this was not, that this was a double course and he could not accept. And then he separated in late 1979 after a private conversation with Archbishop Lefebvre. He left the society, said no. And in the meantime, he was also, he has given lectures in the German seminary in Salzkofen during he was member. And he has given lectures in dogmatic and exegesis, the explanation of the Holy Scripture. But then he started with their own chapel in Munich in 1980. So I met him there in 1983, and then I got ordained priest in 1989. And then, of course, we cooperated with him. We were then finally 4 priests ordained by Bishop Kurz. And he got consecrated bishop in 1984 by Bishop Gerard de Laurier, Monsignor de Laurier, the French Dominican, who got consecrated in May 81 by Archbishop Tuck. Finally, in 1995, I have more or less occasionally met Bishop Pivarunas. And I met him, the other half of the group has invited him for a confirmation to Munich, and I didn't know anything. And then I have suddenly met him on the how you say this, the stair floor, on the floor.
Okay.
On the stairs. And he has offered me his hand with his typical Bishop Pivarunas smile. And my first question was, who are you? Because I didn't know. And he called his name, and then I kissed his ring, and then he invited me to visit him in Omaha. And then in 1996, I visited him in Omaha. The 1999 was my first visit in Spokane. So I came in touch with the seminary, and although I'm not a member officially, I'm associated. And Bishop Pivarunas has been in the meantime, I think 5 or 6 times for confirmation here in Germany, visiting different places.
Yeah, he was supposed to come in 2020, right, Father? But because of Corona, it was not possible, unfortunately.
Was the plan, yeah.
Right. Well, hopefully maybe 2021 or maybe hopefully 2022, one of the next few years, hopefully he can come back over and...
Yeah, we must wait and see, yeah.
Yeah, right. And so now, again, you're in Ulm and you have a small parish, and you go back to the U.S. fairly frequently. Is that right, Father? Every few years?
Yeah. I think I have been 9 times altogether in the United States. My second home is Mount St. Michael. I have been there very often. But you know now the story, and this is now a good question. The life is preparing surprises us in last year, especially. We cannot plan. We do not know.
Right.
We must put our lives in God's hands. This is...
And I know too, Father, you went back to Kazakhstan. Was that last year or 2019 when you went back and visited your old home?
Yeah, it was in September 2018.
18, okay.
More than 2 years ago. because people have many times asked me, have you ever been there again? I said, no, what for? There is nobody I know. All our relatives, they moved to Germany in the meantime. But then I said in this year, the beginning of 2018, why not? And so I made a private trip to refresh the childhood and youth memories, and this was a wonderful trip. And especially now I'm so happy that I have met or I have visited Karaganda again, because now you do not know, will you be permitted to travel with or without the vaccination or whatever it is.
Right.
But this was a private trip, and I am happy that I had also the occasion to visit the crypt of the newly built cathedral, the official Catholic cathedral, and there are the relics of Father Wladyslaw Bukowinski.
Okay. Wow.
He has been beatified several years ago by the modernist Rome. I do very venerate him, but we cannot recognize this act because not a legal authority has done. But he was really a sort of hero, and what he has done, and many other priests. There were other priests, and I remember my dad has told us once he went to confession to another priest, older priest, and he was finally then consecrated bishop in the end of World War II in Western Ukraine. And this Father Alexander Hira heard the confession of my father. My father told us later, Father Alexander told him, imagine how often I was feeling the iron of the gun on my head.
Wow.
You can imagine what I want to say. And I'm still asking which question my father has asked him that he got this response, but obviously it was a very serious conversation in the confession.
Wow. And so has that helped to inspire you, Father? Did this past that you've seen from these priests who really risk their lives to spread the faith and to bring the sacraments, has that helped you as a priest?
We had a very big veneration for our priests, a big respect. For instance, it was not possible for us to greet them hello or good morning, good day. We had always to say in German, Gelobt sei Jesus Christus, praise be Jesus Christ. This was our Catholic greeting. And once I met the Lithuanian priest, the Jesuit father, in a store, occasionally in the city. And there were some other people with him. I didn't know who they are. And they had a conversation in Russian. So I was imagining these were not members of our church, of our parish. And I approached him very close, saying, Gelobt sei Jesus Christus, half loudly, because it was a shame to greet him, a priest, by any other way.
Wow.
And then, of course, with this knowledge, you have venerated the priests. Of course, as a mass server, I think this is not wrong to say, or a big secret. We have also seen in the sacristy that the priests are human beings.
Right.
We could see this, but nevertheless, and this is what I can say. And of course, the ideal of the priesthood was very high for me and for us. And the more I'm surprised, I don't feel that somebody can venerate us today, but it's a challenge, and you feel sometimes so weak, so helpless, but we can only do our duties, and every time has own challenges, all own crosses. And sometimes I'm thinking we have not such huge congregations as in the United States, for instance, some other places, the traditional Catholics. It does depend on the mentality of the history, of the background of the people in this or that country. But I try to think on what I have heard from a fellow priest. He was once on another place, and then people asked him, Father, how big is your congregation? And he called then the number of his parishioners and said, I'm sorry, a very small one. And the lady in the United States, she told him, Father, why do you feel ashamed? You have a very small group, but it's the harder for you to confess and to stay faithful. And possibly we do profit here from your faith,
right,
from your trust, because it's harder for you in some regards. So I think Jesus has told, go and do spread the gospel and do confess. He has not told, go and collect big churches.
That's exactly right.
It would be great to have all together big churches with a strong faith, but everybody has his own cross. In this country, the priests have their own mission, their own cross. In the other, it's a little bit different, but we have to follow the calling of God. Everyone, priest, father, mother, child, grandparents, whoever.
Exactly. And Father, to end the show, what is your advice for people who are living right now through some very difficult times? Because, as you said, there are times where we don't really know, we can't plan, we don't know what's happening. We're all kind of in the dark. How can people survive this, and not just survive, but thrive and have a good, holy life, even though the world is a little crazy?
I think it is helping me much. What do we say when we are immediately before we receive the Holy Sacrament, the Holy Communion? The priest turns to the people saying, see, this is the Lamb of God. And we say, Domine non sum dignus. Oh Lord, I'm not worthy. And sometimes we feel the temptation for depression, losing the confidence, the hope. And then I would recommend switch off your smartphone, switch off your computer, Twitter, Skype, whatever, all media. Go to the chapel. I have my house chapel with the Holy Sacrament. I'm a very privileged person. Turn to the cross, kneel down and say, dear God, have mercy on me, have mercy on us. Then we come to the position is the elemental one. This is elemental for us, because we are face to God and we have to give responses to Him. And when we say, oh dear Lord, my human intelligence has finished to deal with this or that problem, I trust in you. You are my heavenly Father. You are leading me. And when we have to carry this or that cross, we do not know. And what is very impressive, and I do from time to time repeat this also in my sermons, this experience, I was a witness how strong the Soviet communist atheistic system was. And everybody has repeated the slogans, the Communist Party, and our leader, and so on and so on. And I have met in my life in Soviet Union possibly 2, maximally 3 people who were really convinced on this fairy story of building communism. But everybody had to follow in order to avoid repressions. But then we moved to Germany, and then later we heard that Gorbachev has started with changes. And we were very surprised seeing how quickly it has fallen. The collapse was so big, so horrible, because it was built up on a big lie. And this is what I compared with a snowball, now positively interpreting. We have to add prayers, sacrifices, graces to a positive snowball. Possibly one prayer more, or one act of God's confidence, one act of charity, one more. We do not know when. We do not know why God seems to wait as we are interpreting. But we see only a very narrow sector of the reality, and God knows all. And so we can only trust and say, "Oh dear Lord, we are in your hands. We put our lives into you. Do lead us, forgive us our sins, give us the inspiration we need. And we are your children. We are Catholic Christians. First name, second name. This is our identity. Catholic Christians. Children of God, disciples of Jesus Christ." It's not simple, but it's not easy. But the prayer is, an eagle has wings. And we admire a flight of an eagle. We do. But our soul has all the wings. The prayer and the sacrifices. The devotion. When we use them, we can approach to God. And we have then another view. We see the earth, the reality from above, with God's eyes, flying up to the skies. Prayers, but we have to use these wings.
Perfect, Father.
Not theoretically, but practically.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect place to end it. Thank you so much for coming on, Father. I'd love to have you on again sometime. I'm sure we could find something else to talk about. I'll definitely stay in contact with you. For anyone listening to this show, please, if you have any questions for Father, send the email to me, and I can forward it to Father if it's an appropriate email. My email will be attached to the show. It's kevin89davis@gmail.com. If you have questions for me, but especially if you have them for Father, send them first to me, and then I will send them to Father if they're appropriate and if he has time to respond to them. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support me or support Father, please, you can do that in the links attached on Patreon or PayPal. Just specify if it is for the show or if it's for Father Rissling and his parish in Ulm. As we all know, the priests, especially in these little parishes, can always use help and always use extra money. So please, if you also want to contribute to Father with Mass stipends, I'm sure he would also be willing to do that. So send me an email and I will send it to him. Father Rissling, thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you, Kevin, and thanks to and best regards in Jesus Christ and Mary to all your for the people who are watching and listening to this. Yeah, God bless you.
Thank you, Father. God bless.